She heard the words before she fully understood them. They slid into the room like cold air through a cracked window, sharp and unwelcome. You should be grateful that we even allow you to live with our son. At your age. The spoon slipped from Alina's fingers and clinked softly against the edge of her teacup. The sound felt too loud, too final, like a verdict being announced. She stood frozen in the small kitchen, her back to the table, staring at the faded floral pattern on the wallpaper. For a moment, she hoped she had imagined it. That maybe the words weren't meant for her. That maybe they hadn't been spoken at all. But then came the familiar, clipped cough of her mother-in-law, Galina Petrovna. A sound that always came right before something unpleasant. Well, Galina added, tapping her manicured nails against the table. Are you even listening, Elena? Elena slowly turned around. Her heart was beating too fast, as if it were trying to escape her chest. Sitting at the table were Galina and her husband, Viktor Sergeyevich, both dressed neatly as always, like they were about to attend a formal dinner instead of tearing apart a woman's dignity over morning tea. I'm listening, Elena said quietly. Her voice sounded kazaa to her own ears. Small, unsteady. You're not a girl anymore, Galina continued, leaning back in her chair, folding her arms. 36 is not exactly a tender age for starting a family. You came to us with nothing. No apartment, no savings, no prospects, and yet our son married you. He took responsibility for you. You should be thankful every single day. Viktor nodded in agreement, his expression stern, as if Elena were a misbehaving employee rather than his daughter-in-law. A normal woman would bow her head and say thank you. Instead, you walk around like you deserve something. Each word landed like a small blow. Not enough to knock her down at once, but enough to make something inside her slowly cave in. Elena swallowed. I never said I wasn't grateful. Oh, you didn't have to say it, Galina snapped. We can see it. You act offended when we give advice. You get quiet when we remind you of your place. My place, Elena repeated, barely above a whisper. Yes, your place. In this family. Galina's eyes narrowed. You should remember who gave you a roof over your head. Elena felt heat rush to her face. She wanted to defend herself. To explain that she worked full-time. That she paid for groceries. That she cleaned the apartment every evening after coming home exhausted. That she never once asked for money. That she loved their son, Andrei, not because of his apartment or his parents, but because he had once looked at her like she mattered. But the words tangled in her throat. Because somewhere deep inside, an old, familiar voice whispered, maybe they're right. Maybe you should just be grateful. Maybe you really don't deserve more. She had heard that voice all her life. Growing up in a small town with a mother who drank and a father who left early, Elena learned quickly not to expect kindness. At 17, she moved to the city with one suitcase and a head full of dreams. She worked as a waitress, then as a shop assistant, then finally as an accountant's assistant in a small firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. She paid her rent. She fed herself. She survived. When she met Andrei at 33, she didn't think much would come of it. He was polite, attentive, with tired eyes that looked softer when he smiled. He listened to her stories. He brought her tea when she caught a cold. He remembered her birthday. For the first time in years, she felt seen. But Andrei had come with a family. A strong, loud, opinionated family. From the very first visit, Galina had looked her up and down like a product on a discount shelf. So, how old did you say you were? She had asked with a thin smile. And what exactly do you do? Viktor had added, adjusting his glasses. Elena remembered that first dinner like it was yesterday. How she had worn her best dress. How she had baked a cake with her own hands. How her palms had sweated as she cut the slices. She had wanted so badly to be liked. Now, standing in the same kitchen 2 years later, she realized she was still trying. You know, Galina went on, her voice dripping with false calm, girls your age should be thinking about grandchildren. But instead, you can't even give our son a child. Elena flinched. That one hurt the most. She and Andrei had been trying for almost a year. Every month came with hope, then disappointment. Every negative test felt like a quiet failure she carried alone. And now it was being used against her like a weapon. I'm doing everything I can, Elena said, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm. Doing? Galina scoffed. At your age, you should already have had to. Viktor cleared his throat. If it weren't for Andrei's kindness, you'd still be renting some room with strangers. The words blurred together. Elena felt a pressure behind her eyes, a burning she knew too well. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Crying would only make it worse. Crying meant weakness. Crying meant they'd won. I need to go to work, she said suddenly, grabbing her bag from the chair. You always run away from conversations, Galina said sharply. I'm not running away, Elena replied, her hands shaking as she slipped on her coat. I'm late. She rushed out of the apartment before they could say anything else. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded far too gentle for the storm inside her chest. The stairwell smelled of dust and old paint. Elena leaned against the wall, pressing her fist to her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. Her legs felt weak. Her reflection in the dark glass of the window looked Kaza again. Pale, small, tired. Why am I still here? She thought. She wiped her eyes quickly, straightened her coat, and went down the stairs. Outside, the city was already awake. People hurried past her with coffee cups and headphones, living their own lives, unaware that hers felt like it was slowly shrinking. On the bus, she stared out the window without seeing anything. Her phone buzzed. A message from Andre. Mom says you left upset again. What happened? Her fingers hovered over the screen. What happened? What should she say? That his parents humiliated her again. That they made her feel like a burden, a mistake, a charity case. That she was tired of swallowing her pain just to keep peace. She typed. Nothing. Just tired. A lie. A small, quiet lie she had told too many times. The day at work passed in a fog. Numbers blurred together. Colleagues' voices sounded distant. Elena made mistakes she normally wouldn't. At lunch, she sat alone, stirring her soup until it went cold. She kept replaying Galina's words in her head. At your age, with nothing, be grateful. By the time she came home that evening, her shoulders ached with tension. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Andre was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when she entered. Hi, he said, we need to talk. Her heart dropped. About what? She asked, already bracing herself. My parents, he said carefully. They're worried about us. About you. Elena set her bag down slowly. Worried about what exactly? They think you're too sensitive. That you misunderstand their intentions. They only want what's best for me. For you, she repeated. Well, for us, he corrected, but his eyes slid away from hers. Elena felt something crack inside her chest. And what do you want, Andre? She asked quietly. He hesitated, just for a second, but she saw it. I just want peace at home, he finally said. Can't you be more patient with them? They're old, they're set in their ways. Patient. That word tasted bitter. I am patient, Elena said. Every day, I stay silent when they insult me. I smile when they remind me I have nothing. I apologize when I don't even know what I did wrong. How much more patient do you want me to be? Andre sighed. You're exaggerating. The room felt smaller. The walls felt closer. Am I? She whispered. He didn't answer. That silence hurt more than all of Galina's words. Elena went into the bedroom and closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Her hands were clenched into fists so tight her nails dug into her palms. For the first time in a long while, a thought formed clearly in her mind. What if this isn't love anymore? She lay down without changing her clothes, curling into herself like a child. The ceiling above her blurred as tears finally came, hot and unstoppable. She cried not just for today. Not just for Galina's cruelty or Victor's coldness. She cried for all the times she had made herself smaller. For all the words she had swallowed. For the girl she used to be, who once believed she deserved kindness without having to beg for it. And in the quiet of that room, something else grew alongside her pain. A fragile, trembling question. How much longer can I live like this? To be continued. Elena woke up before the alarm, her eyes burning, her pillow damp with dried tears. For a few seconds, she didn't remember where she was or why her chest felt so heavy. Then it all rushed back at once. Galina's voice, Victor's cold nod, Andre's silence, the word patient hanging in the air like a sentence. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside. The apartment felt Kaza in a way it never had before. As if overnight, it had stopped being a home and turned into a place she was only allowed to occupy. Carefully, she slipped out of bed and went into the kitchen. The chair where Galina usually sat was empty. The air felt lighter without her presence, but the relief was mixed with dread. Elena knew this calm wouldn't last. She made herself coffee, hands shaking as she poured the water. The smell didn't comfort her the way it used to. Everything tasted flat lately, as if her emotions had drained the color out of the world. Her phone buzzed. A message from her old friend Katya. Are you okay? You sounded strange yesterday. Want to meet after work? Elena stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Yes, please. At work, she barely held it together. She kept checking her phone, half expecting another message from Andre, another demand to understand his parents. But nothing came. During lunch, she locked herself in a bathroom stall and cried silently, pressing her hand over her mouth so no one would hear. She didn't even know exactly what she was crying about anymore. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything. The slow erosion of her self-worth. The constant feeling of being a guest in her own life. After work, she met Katya at a small cafe near the metro. Katya took one look at her and frowned. Elena, what happened to you? She asked softly. Elena tried to smile. It came out crooked. Nothing. I'm just tired. Katya didn't push her drink toward her like she usually did. She just reached across the table and took Elena's hand. Don't lie to me, she said quietly. You look like someone who's been drowning and pretending it's rain. Something inside Elena broke open. The words poured out in a rush. About Galina, about Victor, about Andre, about the humiliation, the comments about her age, the constant reminders that she had nothing, about the miscarriage, about trying for a baby and feeling like a failure every month, about the way Andre looked away when she needed him most. Katya listened without interrupting, her eyes dark with anger by the time Elena finished. Why are you still there? Katya asked bluntly. Elena stared into her cup. Because I love him, Katya sighed. Do you, or are you just afraid to be alone again? The question landed painfully close to the truth. Elena didn't answer. That evening, when she came home, Galina and Victor were back. They sat at the kitchen table like judges waiting for a defendant. Andre stood by the window, arms crossed. We need to talk, Galina said, not bothering with greetings. Elena set her bag down slowly. Her heart was pounding, but something inside her felt strangely calm. Like she was already past the worst part. We've been discussing your behavior, Victor said. It's unacceptable. My behavior, Elena repeated. You create tension in this family, Galina continued. You're too emotional, too sensitive, always offended. You should be grateful we took you in, and instead you act like a victim. Elena looked at Andre. Do you think that too? He hesitated. Again. I think you should try harder to get along with them, he said finally. Something inside her went quiet. She took a deep breath. Andre, do you love me? The question hung in the air, fragile and trembling. Of course I do, he said quickly. Why would you even ask that? Then why do you never defend me? She asked. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. That scared her more than anything. Why do you let them humiliate me? Why am I always the one who has to be patient? Who has to understand? Who has to swallow everything? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Galina snorted. You're turning this into drama again. No, Elena said softly. I'm finally telling the truth. They all stared at her. For 2 years, I've tried to be good enough for you, she continued. I've cleaned your house. I've paid my share. I've smiled when you insulted me. I've stayed silent when you reminded me I'm old, useless, broken. I thought if I just tried harder, you'd accept me. Her chest tightened. But you won't. No matter what I do, it will never be enough for you. Galina waved her hand dismissively. Don't be ridiculous. You're just overreacting. Elena turned to Andre again. And you let them do this. Every single time. I don't want conflict, he said weakly. And I don't want to disappear, Elena replied. The words surprised even her. A heavy silence filled the room. I can't live like this anymore, Elena said quietly. I deserve respect. I deserve kindness. I deserve a partner who stands beside me, not behind his parents. Andre looked panicked. What are you saying? I'm saying, I'm leaving. Galina laughed sharply. Where will you go? You have nowhere. Elena met her gaze. For the first time, she didn't feel small. I'll find somewhere, she said. I always have. Andre stepped toward her. Elena, don't do this. You're just emotional. Let's talk tomorrow. I've been talking for 2 years, she said. You just never listened. She went into the bedroom and pulled out her suitcase. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were steady. She folded her clothes carefully, as if doing something ordinary, something real, something she could control. Andre hovered in the doorway. You can't just leave like this. I can, she said. And I am. What about us? He whispered. Elena paused, holding one of his shirts in her hands. The memory of how he used to wrap it around her when she was cold made her throat ache. I wanted us, she said softly. I just didn't want to lose myself to keep us. Tears finally spilled down his face. I'll talk to them, I promise. I'll change. She shook her head. You shouldn't have to promise now. You should have done it then. She zipped her suitcase. At the door, Galina stood with her arms crossed. You'll regret this, she said coldly. You're not young anymore. No one else will want you. Elena felt the sting of the words, but they didn't break her this time. Maybe, she said quietly. But I'd rather be alone than be where I'm not wanted. She stepped into the stairwell. The air felt different, lighter, sharper, like the first breath after being underwater too long. She went to Katya's apartment that night. Katya didn't ask questions. She just hugged her, long and tight, and let Elena cry until her chest stopped hurting. The next weeks were hard. Elena slept on a couch. She looked for a room to rent. She went to work every day with swollen eyes and a forced smile. She doubted herself 100 times. She missed Andre. She missed the version of him she thought he was. He called. He texted. He apologized. He promised again. She didn't go back. One evening, sitting alone in her small rented room, Elena caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked thinner, tired, but her eyes were different. They were her own again. She placed a hand on her stomach, not in hope this time, but in tenderness toward herself. I'm still here, she whispered. And that's enough. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Her future was uncertain. It was scary. It was empty. But it was hers. And for the first time in a long while, Elena felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace.